Hi, scholars, and welcome back to Lesson 5. This is part 2. Today, we're going to continue to work towards our goal of being able to summarize a Greek myth by orally summarizing our sentences and our evidence organizers that we've been working on. So please have out your handout 3B in your Wit and Wisdom workbooks. We are also going to explain the meaning of idioms as they pertain to fate. So we're learning about a new type of figurative language, and please have out your Wit and Wisdom notebooks as well as a pencil. So let's go ahead and dive into this lesson today and get started.
Today we will continue to prepare our answer for the focusing question by orally rehearsing what we will write in our explanatory paragraphs. This will help you organize your ideas so that later you can write a draft. Let's get started by turning to handout 3B, or the evidence organizer that you created in your journal. We're going to use evidence in our organizers to create complete sentences. We can use the notes that we took in our journal or on your handout to practice making complete sentences that we'll be able to write in a paragraph. I'll give you some examples. When I look at my notes, in my first row, where we collected evidence about gods and goddesses, I can examine my evidence and the elaboration that is related to it. One sentence I could make here would be, let's see, how about this? Gods created and controlled everything. This was important because Greeks were polytheistic, and religion was important to them. What do you think? Could you try making sentences with your notes? Let's try another example with mine before I set you off to do your own. If I wanted to make another sentence about how myths include gods and goddesses, I could say, Zeus was king of the gods, and Demeter controlled the seasons. This was important because gods controlled everything in Greek mythology. As you can see, I'm still working out some of the kinks, but that's why this is practice. Pause the video now so you can practice saying complete sentences for each of the characteristics of myths. Remember, they include gods and goddesses, they include heroes and monsters, creation myths tell how the world came to be, and morality myths taught people how to behave. You can resume the video when you've had time to work through your entire chart. If you'd like.
All right, scholars, we're going to go ahead and pause right there. As our presenter walked us through, our evidence organizer is helping us to build our complete sentences. So we're going to practice the skill of orally summarizing, which means saying out loud our sentences to practice, which is a wonderful skill to do before we begin to dive into our writing, which we will be summarizing in the next lesson. So we want to go ahead and take a look at this, and I've highlighted the first box. Includes gods and goddesses as our first characteristics. We had two details here, and each detail was tied to an elaboration piece that explained why this is important. So I added the sentence frame, this is important because. So I can simply read my evidence and then say this is important because, and then read the reason why. So let's go ahead and try that for the first idea. Greeks believed gods created and controlled everything in the world. This is important because Greeks believed in many gods and believed that gods controlled everything. I can also do this for my second detail about gods and goddesses. Zeus was king of the gods. This is important because religion was important to the Greeks. So I'm simply saying some of my evidence and saying why it is important. And I already have all of this written down. So let's go ahead and continue practicing. Let's move on to our next section, where we talked about includes heroes and monsters. Our first piece of evidence is heroes included Hercules and Achilles. This is important because it taught people through exciting stories how to behave. Let's take our next detail here. Demeter controlled the seasons. This is important because God controlled everything. Now I want you to give it a try. For creation myths, what story can you make? A sentence can you make? Read a detail And then simply say, this is important because, and go ahead and name the elaboration that goes with it. Go ahead and give it a try for creation myths. Great. Some things I heard were Prometheus myths explain how people got fire. This is important because it explained things that people didn't understand, like changes in the seasons or fire. Go ahead and try this for morality myths. Name one of our pieces of evidence and then say why it is important. Great. Something I heard was that greed was punished and goodness was rewarded. This is important because it taught people how to behave. Wonderful job orally summarizing today. Scholars, let's go ahead and now dive into the next part of our lesson. We're going to explain the meaning of idioms that pertain to fate. But let's first check in with our presenter.
Like, you can even pretend you're rehearsing with someone. Maybe there's a friend or family member nearby. Maybe you have a pet or a stuffed animal. We'll help prepare you for writing our explanatory paragraphs later. As you reviewed your evidence, were you thinking back on some of those myths we read together? Let's take a closer look at some of the language in these myths as they were described in our text, Understanding Greek Myths. I'm going to read a few sentences from this text. As I read each one, I want you to think, what does each of the bolded words or phrases on the slide mean? Persephone was very beautiful, and she caught the eye of the god Hades in the underworld. One day, when she was in the meadow, he opened a great hole in the ground and kidnapped her. Demeter was heartsick. Zeus begged her to change her mind, but she was determined. What do you think each of these bolded words or phrases on the slide mean? Let's take a closer look at each sentence. First, it said Persephone was very beautiful and she caught the eye of the god Hades in the underworld. Does this mean that she actually took out his eye and caught it? No, of course not. Caught the eye of the god Hades means that Persephone got Hades' attention. Then we read, one day, when she was in the meadow, he opened a great hole in the ground and kidnapped her. Demeter was heartsick. Think, does this mean that she actually has a heart disease? No, we know better than that. When it says Demeter was heartsick, it means that Demeter was sad because she lost her daughter. The next sentence reads, Zeus begged her to change her mind. Does this mean that Zeus wanted her to switch the brain around in her head with another brain? No, of course not. It means that Zeus wanted to convince her to have a different opinion. These bolded words and phrases are called idioms. Idioms are phrases that don't have a literal meaning just as the words say, but instead they have a different abstract meaning.
Scholars, I want to remind you of all the work we've done, especially in our first module this year, where we talked about the differences between figurative and literal language. We talked about how something that is literal means that it is exact. It's the exact meaning. Like a literally great heart is the heart that is beating in our chest. Then we talked about figurative language. Figurative language. Figurative meaning not exact language. It has a different meaning. Literal, exact meaning, like our literal good hearts in our chest that beat strong and are healthy. And figurative, meaning not exact. For example, we talked about having a good heart means that we're not describing our literal hearts in our chest, but rather the kindness and empathy that others can see in us. that might cause them to say that we have a good heart, meaning we are a good person. So this is another form of figurative language that we are learning about today, where it does not have the exact meaning. Rather, idioms have a different meaning. Let's continue.
Over time, certain phrases in English have taken on special meanings, and these are passed down from person to person and generation to generation. These examples that I read with you today are called idioms. Idioms, like the ones we just read, are a type of figurative language, and they're used to make our language more fun and colorful and interesting. So let's turn back to page 8 in our text, Understanding Greek Myths, where we read about fate. Follow along as I read this aloud. Fate plays a big part in Greek myths. The characters go through a lot to try and change the outcome of their lives, but fail. The king of Thebes tried to avoid the prophecy that his son Oedipus would slay him. In the end, he failed, and Oedipus killed him. The myths taught the Greeks that fate could not be avoided. In our other text, Gifts from the Gods, page 19 gave us a definition of fate and an example from another text. It says here that fate's definition is the supposed force or power that predetermines events. Another definition is a final result or outcome. In Greek mythology, events often happen due to fate. Fate is the idea that things are already determined to be a certain way, or that the final outcome is inevitable and out of our control. There's nothing we can do about it. Let's add fate to our glossary. Turn to the last page of your journal and add fate on the next line. Pause the video now to give yourself time to write.
All right, scholars. So as our presenter reminded us, in the back of our Wit and Wisdom notebooks, we've been compiling a list of new words in our vocabulary dictionary. So please go ahead and add the word fate as you see here. Record the definition, the supposed force or power that predetermines events. And synonyms, a final result or outcome. We're going to explore more about fate and what this means in a moment, but for now, please make sure you have this and pause the video to take more time if needed. Here we go.
In Greek mythology, events often happen due to fate. There are several idioms that use the word fate. Let's look at one now. First, turn to the next clean page in the front of your journal now and title that new page Idioms, like I did here. Then, write this first idiom on the first line of your journal page. Pause the video now so you can start your notes.
All right, scholars, so just turn to the next page and write idioms at the top.
Of someone's fate being
Great.
sealed, like it says here, I think that their destiny, or what will happen to them, has already been decided. I sketched an image that will help me remember this. If you were floating down a river, about to go over a waterfall, you could think that your fate is sealed. Here's the quick sketch I did to help me remember. Then I used this idiom in a sentence of my own. When the canoe was about to fall over the waterfall, he thought his fate was sealed. Now it's your turn. Turn to the next page in your journal and pick one of these next 4 idioms to create your own sketch and your own sentence. Take the time you need to draw something that represents the idiom. And you saw my sketch. It doesn't have to be perfect. Then use that idiom in your own sentence. Your sentence can be about your sketch or something different. Pause the video now to give yourself time to work. When you resume the video, we'll share our ideas. Pause the video now.
All right, scholars. So as our presenter did, we listed idioms at the top of a new page. We recorded the example when the canoe was about to fall over the waterfall. He thought his fate was sealed. He thought his destiny was determined for him. He thought, gosh, I'm going to fall off this waterfall and that's it for me. I already know that bad things are going to happen. Okay, so that's fate being sealed. Explains how thinking that something is just going to happen because of what would usually happen in that situation. Then we recorded the next 4 idioms. Number 2, fate is worse than death. Number 3, leave one to one's own fate. Number 4, a twist of fate. And number 5, tempt fate. We're going to go ahead and work together for number 2. Fate is worse than death, and come up with an example that we can write and draw together. When I read this, that fate is worse than death, it means that there's something very bad is going to happen. For example, I might write, his parents wanted him to go to a great college, a top college. So getting an F on his report card, or a 1, for example, as we might call that now, was a fate worse than death. That could be my example there, and I could draw a picture to go with it. To save time, I'm going to go ahead and let us continue listening to our presenter, and you can write down your own images or sentences to go along with each. You don't need to record both.
Great work. Let's reflect on what each one of these idioms means. The first option was, fate is worse than death. If you chose this idiom, pause the video and share your sketch and sentence aloud with me now. I heard some good examples. This idiom, fate is worse than death, means something very bad. An example could be, his parents wanted him to go to a top college, so getting an F on his report card was a fate worse than death. Next, it says leave one to one's fate. If you chose this idiom, go ahead and pause the video and share your response aloud. I heard more great ideas. This idiom means to leave something to whatever becomes of it. For example, a sentence could be, the firefighter wanted to be left to his fate as he knew the task was dangerous. A twist of fate. If you chose this idiom, you know what to do. Pause the video so I can hear you explain it out loud. Thank you for sharing. This idiom, a twist of fate, means a surprising change of events. One example could be, when she won the gymnastics competition, it was a twist of fate, as she had not practiced the winning routine beforehand. And last, tempt fate. If this was your choice, pause the video and read your responses out loud. Thank you again for sharing. So, tempt fate means to take a huge chance. For example, when the golfer was almost hit by lightning, he thought, I don't want to tempt the fates. I better go inside. Why do you think fate was so important to the ancient Greeks?
Scholars, this is the question I'm going to have you answer today. Now that we've learned a little bit more about what fate is, and if we can remind ourselves, we can go into our dictionaries. Fate is the supposed force or power that predetermines events. We recorded a few idioms about fate and heard what they meant. It can be something very bad. It kind of means leaving Making something permanent to yourself, to leave something to whatever becomes of it. It means to attempt fate, to take a huge chance. So knowing everything that we've learned about fate, why do you think that fate is so important to the ancient Greeks? Why are we talking about fate? What does this have to do with Greek mythology? Today, I want you to answer that question in your exit ticket for today. For example, I think fate is so important to the ancient Greeks because. How would you complete that sentence based off of today's lesson? I can't wait to read your responses. All right, scholars, that's all for today. Have a great day, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.